Hey there, welcome back to another review. This time, it's a review of the 1974 horror classic, The Texas Chain Saw Massacre. Now, I wasn't really planning on reviewing this film anytime soon, but with the recent news of Leatherface himself, Gunnar Hansen's passing, he passed away yesterday at the age of 68. I just felt compelled to at least do something to honor Gunnar and to not only honor him, but also Marilyn Burns, who also passed away last year, as well as anyone else from this film who was a part of this legendary, groundbreaking film in the horror genre. And it's a way for me to send them off, so to speak. It's a way for me to pay my respects to not only those who have passed on who were in this film, but also to the film itself. And I just thought it would be my own. It's my way of basically giving these great actors and these great people my respect, paying my respects, so to speak. Texas Chain Saw Massacre is a film that I didn't really grow up with. I didn't really see it until I was an adult, mainly because my mother would not allow me to watch horror films when I was younger. When I was a kid, it was forbidden. I was forbidden from watching horror movies. So that's kind of a reason why I'm so obsessed with them nowadays, is because I wasn't able to watch any when I was a kid. So when I got old enough to be able to watch horror films, I just started, binge watching horror, and I really started really enjoying the genre. That's not, I don't love horror just because of the fact that it was forbidden from me. Um, I love it for a lot of other reasons as well. It's my favorite genre of film because no other genre really gets me. I guess there's something about horror that really stands out to me. The worlds that it creates, the tension it builds is unlike any other genre I can think of, other than maybe a suspense thriller, which to them, those films in themselves have horror elements. So, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, though, I caught on VHS a long time ago. It was about a few years ago when I saw it for the first time. And even when I saw it for the first time, I loved it. I was really, really enthralled by this movie. It was one of those films that I thought was just really raw and really unrelenting in its terror. Even when I saw it on VHS, it really unsettled me. It was an unsettling, unnerving experience. And I hadn't really ever seen a horror film like that. I can only imagine what it was like for audiences back in 1974 seeing this film, because this is unlike anything they'd ever seen before. Psycho was pretty intense, but Texas Chainsaw Massacre makes Psycho look like child's play. And I'm not talking about the 80s movie with Chucky. It makes it look like child's play, like The Term. It makes it look really tame in comparison. And what's really impressive about the film Texas Chainsaw Massacre, among multiple other things that are impressive about this film, is the fact that it is able to be scary and to be pseudo-viably horrifying without really being gory. There really isn't any gore in this movie. There's not really, there's a little bit of blood, but not a lot. Hitchhiker cuts himself and cuts up Franklin, but it's not a bloody film. It's not a gory movie, but it's still a very effective horror film regardless. The films like this and John Carpenter's Halloween prove that, and in essence Psycho in a way too, prove that you don't need blood and gore to be a good horror film. And it seems like lately nowadays with the horror genre, it seems that we're just going for the gore stuff, and especially with the mainstream horror films, they're just going for the gore. We're going for the jump scares. And this film didn't really have that many jump scares, but it has one particular scare that always gets me, and it's because it doesn't predict itself. It doesn't have a music cue that precedes it or anything. And even the score in this film is creepy. The score itself is just a bunch of weird sound effects and just strange music and strange sounds. And the score itself is something, if you hear it, it really sends a chill down your spine. So, yeah, there's a lot of things that are great about this movie, and I will go up through all of them during the course of this review. But I just thought I'd just come up, just say a few things right off the top of my head about how I was introduced to the film and things like that. And yeah, even on VHS and full screen, I was really captivated by this film. And then I got the Laserdisc, and I saw it on Laserdisc, and I loved it then. The second time, it was just as good. And then I watched it. I think the most recent time I saw it last night in honor of Gunnar Hansen was the third time I saw the movie, and it was still as great as I remember it being the first time. That's a testament of an excellent film, folks. Is a movie that no matter how many times I watch it, it's still great. It still holds up. It still stands the test of time. It still makes me feel the same way it did the first couple times I saw it, which it really makes me feel uncomfortable. It's the combination of the score and the sound effects and the subject material of this inbred family of cannibals in the backwoods, in the south, somewhere in the middle of nowhere. The idea of it, I thought, was not really that far-fetched. It was loosely based on a true story, by Ed Gein, the serial killer, Ed Gein. And it's a very skeevy, very, it's one of those movies that it's not clean. It makes you feel really dirty after watching it, and you want to jump in the shower right away. And there's a lot of films that have tried to be the next Texas Chainsaw Massacre after this movie and have failed, but that goes to show you how impactful this film was to the genre of horror. Because so many other films from that genre tried to be the next Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Um, this film more so, I probably would say Psycho opened the door, but Texas Chainsaw Massacre blew the door wide open for slasher films and for the horror film genre. It really started a whole new renaissance of horror, and I really got to thank Tobe Hooper and everyone else who was involved with this film for busting open that door. Because without Texas Chainsaw Massacre and its success, not only financially but critically, because even critics back when this came out originally were actually, for the most part, were actually pretty shocked and impressed by the film. And there's a reason why it's considered one of the greatest horror films of all time. And I definitely do agree with that. This is in my top 10 of my all-time favorite horror films. I really love this movie. Watching it again for the third time was almost a transcendent experience because it I really get sucked into this movie. I love the way it looks. I love the way it's set up. I love the editing. The cinematography is great. The Actually, the cinematography for the most part is actually pretty underrated. And the story and the characters and it's just the iconic imagery of Leatherface himself, Gunnar Hansen with the saw, with the chainsaw, and yeah, it started a lot of things for the horror genre. Psycho had a twist, kind of at the end, but not to the extent that this film did. This film really kind of started that sort of, okay, you think, think you're safe. No, you're not. Uh, no place is safe. You're not safe. The place where you think once you finally think you got away and you've escaped from the terror is still there. And this is one of those films that I think really solidifies that horror trope that you see in a lot of other horror films that have come after the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's not a body count movie. It's not trying to be. It's it's a slow burn. It takes a while to get going, but once it does, it's unrelenting. It does not stop until then credits start rolling. And that's one of the things I love about this movie. It's a slow build up, but it's still a very solid slow build up. The slow build up doesn't even bother me, to be honest. I like it. Introduces you to these characters and this really strange, surreal, southern fried fear, really. It's this southern fried fear that even you feel it from the opening credits. With the whole scene with the in the in the cemetery with the corpse and the sun bearing down on it. The way that that is shot is just great. I mean, with a putrefying corpse, right off the bat, you're just like, ugh. It just makes you feel sick to your stomach. And I love how you have, and then of course the iconic opening, of course, which I think was before you see the scene of the the graveyard and the putrefying corpse in the sunlight. You see these really great way that like there's this, so it looks like someone's taking these pictures in the dark of these just corpses. And the music and the sound effects in the sequence is just like it's like a creaking door or a rusty hinge, but it just it sends the hair on my arm straight up just listening to that sound. Just like, that sound it's just pure genius on Tobe Hooper's part for deciding to use just regular ordinary sound effects like that and to put them with this imagery. It just creates this really terrifying mix of creepy imagery and creepy sound effects that just make everything creepier. And I also love how there is on the radio there's these little news broadcasts that tell you what's going on in this area where the events of the film are happening. And there's a lot of crazy stuff going on, suicides and grave robberies and mutilation of human bodies and all, and it's already right off the bat you're already unsettled and you're like, oh, there's something wrong here. And then even when you get introduced to the characters, we have Sally, who's played by Marilyn Burns, who also sadly she passed away last year. And watching this film again really showed me how great she was. She did a really fantastic performance by Marilyn Burns in this movie of playing multiple different pretty much multiple different emotions. She does a great job with these different emotions that she has in this movie. She starts out and different personalities as well. She starts out as just the fun-loving young woman. She's just there to enjoy life, and then she goes through hell and she starts to crack. And she does a great job being afraid, and she did a great job showing the cracks in her armor, so to speak, and showing her go off the deep end. And by the end of the movie, even though she's safe from Leatherface and the family of free and his family of freaks, cannibals, the Sawyer family, she's still lost it. She's hysterical at the end, and Marilyn Burns did a great job portraying that and did it realistically. And I know some people have the problem with her screaming a lot near the end. I didn't have a problem with that because I thought that was pretty realistic. I don't know about you, but if I was in that scenario that she was in, I'd be screaming too. I'd be like, "Oh, please no, no, ah, please don't do this, don't do this, don't eat me." So I have no problem with that. And she had quite the pipes on her too. So yeah, definitely rest in peace, Marilyn. You were fantastic in this film, and I will probably say you will live on forever, just like Gunnar Hansen and Jim Siedow and Paul A. Partain, who played Franklin. You will all live on forever in this film. You may be dead, your body may be dead, but your spirit and your soul is encapsulated in this film. and this film will continue to stand the test of time for decades, long after even I am gone from this earth, and which is just it's immortality, really, of all of these actors who have passed away, who have been in this film, have achieved immortality in their own special way, because they will never be forgotten, because they were big integral parts of the Texas Chain Saw Massacre, which is one of the most iconic horror films of all time. It's one of the most influential horror films. It's one of the best. And when anybody does anything about, if they're doing a film studies class and they're talking about horror, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is going to be discussed. It's going to be talked about. And so this film has a very special place in history, and because of that, so does everyone else who is in this film, living and dead. So I just wanted to really solidify that, because that's one of the main reasons why I decided to do this video, is to pay my respects to those who were a part of this film. And not just Gunnar, but Marilyn Burns and Jim Siedow, who played the old man, played the cook, and Partain, who played Franklin, who this third time around, like I remember in my review of this the second time around, I had a problem with him, but the third time around, I didn't have a problem with him at all. I actually liked him. I actually liked Franklin. I didn't find him annoying. I thought it was kind of unique to have this type of character, a guy in a wheelchair, and he had a quirky sense of humor that I didn't mind, and he definitely did feel for him. Uh, so yeah, I actually didn't mind him the third time around. I actually liked him a lot, actually. So that's not even a problem. That used to be a problem for me, but it's not a problem anymore. So, and Jim Siedow I just thought was great. Um, he did a great job fooling you. You thought he was just some, whatever guy runs a gas station. He's just an old kind Southern man, but then he's like some demented guy who he means well, but because we do have to do, but he's psychotic. He's still crazy, but he's not as crazy as the hitchhiker, Edwin Neal. He's not as crazy as Leatherface, Gunnar Hansen, but he's still crazy. I mean, the scene where he ties up Marilyn Burns near the end and has her in his truck and he's poking her just to get her to keep screaming is some really freaky stuff, and really disturbing stuff too. And you didn't need to show that much either. And it's still really disturbing to see that scene. Just him poking her in a bag and she's screaming for her life, and he's just like, everything will be all right. And poking her, and oh, stop it, and then he just keeps doing it because he wants to hear her scream, because he gets off on that, because he's a sick fuck. So rest in peace, Jim Siedow. You do a great job too, playing this I thought it was a very memorable character, the old man. And Paulie Partain, the same thing goes to you. Rest in peace for playing Franklin. You really don't see a lot of disabled characters, characters with disabilities in films like this. And he said this wasn't portrayed as the smartest guy, but that wasn't his character. And there was something endearing about that character, I thought, that was actually really refreshing. I actually did feel for him when he did die. Because he was the guy who had the right idea. He's like, let's go, let's get out of here, let's leave. Our friends haven't come back in hours. It's dark. We have no idea where we are. Let's leave. Let's go. Let's go get some help. Go to the gas station. I don't want to stay here in the middle of nowhere in an area where all of our friends have disappeared. Usually when that happens and they aren't coming back and they haven't come back for hours, they're not coming back. Usually that's what happens. I mean, if they disappear like that without a trace, there's a pretty good percentage that they're dead, and I don't want to be next. So so I did like that about him. So yeah, great cast, excellent cast. I even love how It's the opening narration. The opening narration is great too. It's a great way to open the film. It's a unique way to open a movie, and it's the narration is by John Larroquette, and I thought he did a great job with that too. And I remember when I first read that bit of trivia, I was like, "Whoa, really?" It's narrated by Van Doe, from Richie Rich. But yeah, there's a lot of things about this movie that are just fantastic. I don't even need to go down to the. I don't even need to talk about the plot synopsis. Everyone knows about the plot synopsis for Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's these group of friends. They arrive in a van. They're in this this basically in the middle of nowhere in some southern small town, and they decide to pick up a hitchhiker played by Edwin Neal, who's more than a little bit crazy. I thought Edwin Neal did a great job playing this very crazy, weird character, the hitchhiker. And I definitely did. There is some good black humor near the end, like the whole thing where Marilyn Burns is tied up and she's crying for help, and Edwin Neal is like, oh, oh. I always thought that was pretty. Excuse me. It was a good performance of Edwin Neal. And Leatherface, of course, is going, ooh, and they're all like, mimicking or screaming. That's really twisted and fucked up. Excuse me, I might be getting a cold. Twisted and fucked up, but pretty memorable. And the whole scene with Grandpa, who just can't seem to hit Marilyn Burns in the head with a hammer. He just keeps missing it over and over again. Hits her once, but just not working out. So yeah, there's a decent amount of black humor. Not as much as Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, but it's there. It's definitely there. So yeah, you have the character Edwin Neal plays a hitchhiker. They pick him up. He goes crazy. He cuts himself and then cuts Franklin. They drop him off. The reason why they're on this road trip is they're gonna go visit. I think it was like Franklin, one of his relatives. They're gonna visit his place, and so they stop at a gas station. That's where they first meet up with Jim Siedow. He says, "Get some barbecue, We're gonna stay here for a while. There's nowhere, not really to go anywhere. I wouldn't go anywhere if I were you. I know these girls don't want to go anywhere." And so they end up getting some barbecue and a drink, and then they end up driving, and they go back. They go check out Franklin's relative's place. And even in this sequence, when they're all just walking around this dilapidated house, there was a sense of dread that I just felt. There's this very prevailing sense of dread and impending doom. And when Franklin struggles and manages to get into the house without any help on his wheel, because he's in a wheelchair, so it's really hard for him to get around. And he looks around the house and he sees just these bones and stuff. Like there's just like these bones and all this kind of stuff, and it's just like there's weird these carcasses and things like that. There's a bone like what it looks like a sculpture or something hanging on the from a doorway. It's just some weird stuff. And then he tells there's this other couple who I believe it's it's Kirk and Pam. Kirk and Pam go to they basically get directed to go to a creek because they want to go swimming. And Franklin tells them about this creek that you go past these two houses or whatever, and there's a trail. Well, they don't find the creek, but they do find another house. And Kirk decides, hey, maybe you can ask. He sees that there's gas on the property, so he decides he's going to go to the house and ask for gas. Right there is something I would never do. I would never do that. I don't care if I need gas that much. I'm not going to someplace in the middle of nowhere. I don't even know where the fuck I am. I don't know anybody over here. And I'm not doing that because this is the kind of stuff that could actually happen. This could happen to you. This isn't that far-fetched. In some ways it is, with the whole, the old man surviving off of blood and he looks like a corpse and all this. But at the same time, there have been bands of killers, bands of families who have come in and they have lived in small towns and they wait for people to come to them, and you never know. That's the thing. You never know. It's just when you're in a situation like this where you're in an area you're not used to, it's probably best to err on the side of caution for the most part, unless it's absolutely necessary. And it seemed like it wasn't because they did have gas in the van. They just didn't have a lot of it. It was just trying to get more. But anyway, so Kurt goes in, looks for gas. Nobody answers. And instead of being a rational human being, he goes in the house and then keeps saying, "Hello, anybody here? Hello? Hello?" Because he hears like a pig squealing. And then he's like, "What?" And then he goes in. And then you have the first time you see Leatherface. And it's such a memorable sequence. And Gunnar Hansen is such a big presence. And what's so amazing about Gunnar in his performance in this film is that he really didn't have any lines of dialogue. He just was Leatherface. He said a few things. He didn't really say anything. He just mumbled and made some noises. And most of his performance was through his actions. And since his face is covered up, it's a very impressive performance. It's a very underrated performance because he was able to show emotion through his actions as if he was miming things, and that's not an easy thing to do because he didn't really have any words to say. He didn't have any lines of dialogue to say, so he couldn't get across his emotions that way. So he gets them across through subtle movements and or not so subtle movements. And he's also a very intimidating presence because he's big, tall. I think he was from I think it was Iceland, and he's this big, tall guy, and definitely can wield a chainsaw. And it's just one of those, big, burly guys that you just do not want to get in a confrontation with, especially if he's wielding a sledgehammer, and then that's or a hammer. That's what happened, Kirk. You should have asked Scotty to beam me up. You should have been like, nope, I'm not going here, and it gets popped in the head. And I love how the pig squeal sound effects are added into this sequence as Leatherface just keeps smacking him on the head, knocking him out, and you don't really see any blood, that much blood or gore. Knocks him out with this hammer with 2 whacks, and then slams the steel door shut. Which just the whole look of the house too is it's great production design. Because you got this house that has all, in that room it's like red velvet on the wall, and there's all these like animal skulls on it, and here comes Leatherface wearing like really what it is, it's a mask made out of human flesh. And he just goes and bam, knocks this guy out. Because at first the guy says, "Hello, anybody there?" Here comes Leatherface, just making weird noises and then knocking him out and then slamming the door, and then it's a very visually arresting sequence. Like it just grabs you, and then you're shell shocked. You're like, what just happened? And then of course you have his girlfriend. Pam, played by Teri McMinn, she goes into the house to look for him, and she ends up in this room, this sequence just makes me feel ill. It makes me feel sick to my stomach. It makes my skin crawl. And there's no gore. There's no blood or anything in this sequence. There's just all these different bones and carcasses. There's a live chicken, squawking and hanging in a cage from the ceiling. And you have it's lit really bad. It's just like one light bulb that's about to burn out, and it's just so, ugh. Human bones mixed with animal bones, and then of course then Leatherface comes in and grabs Pam and puts her on a meat hook, and then that just continues this that feeling that you get that's throughout your whole body where you're just uncomfortable, and that's really what this sequence does, and the rest of the film after. And when Leatherface first shows up, then the film just does not stop. It's unrelenting. It revs up and stays running throughout until the end credits. And it's one of the best films I can think of when it comes to something like that, where it's a slow burn and then it picks up like bam, and then it just keeps going and keeps going and keeps escalating and keeps escalating, and it ends on basically ends at the highest point of the climax it possibly can. It's a race against time and a race for your life. And so yeah, Pam gets put on a meat hook, and they don't see her back get stuck on the hook. You don't see that. The sequence is very effective without actually showing you that, because it's still, you're seeing the image of her on a meat hook. You're like, calling for help. It's very tragic. You feel very helpless. This film makes you feel helpless a lot of times, and that's a great thing for a horror film. It makes you feel like there is no there's no safety. There's no safe harbor. You're not going to survive. And that's something about the film I also really admire. Because there's a lot of horror films that I do enjoy, though, that do have that hope. But there's other horror films that I like this, that don't. It works sometimes for certain films like it does for this, and other ones it doesn't. But you have to keep the same tone, and you have to. And this it works for Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because that's the type of film it's trying to be. I mean, the tagline itself says, "Who will survive, and what will be left of them." So that alone tells you what type of movie that Tobe Hooper is trying to make and provide for the audience. So then you have the whole stuff with Franklin and Sally, and Sally's boyfriend goes in and tries to check on and see what's going on, and he ends up getting killed because he goes and finds Pam in a freezer, and then Leatherface kills him, and then Sally and Franklin then go on and look for their friends. Franklin gets killed. Sally ends up getting chased by Leatherface in a very tense, just nail-biting sequence where she's running through the forest while Leatherface is chasing after her with a chainsaw. She thinks she gets to safety at the gas station, and the movie pulls a rug out from underneath you, and you realize that she's not safe, and at the same time you're not safe either as the viewer. And she gets kidnapped, taken back to the house. You find out that Leatherface and the hitchhiker are all relatives of Jim Siedow, and then you have that really uncomfortable sequence where she's at the dinner table sitting in a chair, which looks like they put human hands on the armrests, and so her hands are resting on human hands that were just recently severed. And just the idea of that is just makes me want to retch. And then you have the whole dinner table scene, which I was mentioning earlier, where they're all making fun of her, and she's screaming for her life and saying, "Don't do it, don't do this, you don't have to do this." They give the old man the hammer, he can't do it. She escapes, she jumps through the window. Sally's like Sally, this character, Marilyn Burns, definitely went through hell. Literally went through hell. She jumps through not one but two windows. She jumped through one window to get away from Leatherface, jumps through another one to get away from Leatherface and the rest of his family. It's just running away, and the ending of the film is just so suspenseful, because she manages to escape a situation you thought that was hopeless. She's get busted out the window, and the hitchhiker's chasing after her. Leatherface is chasing after her with the chainsaw. She's screaming for her life. She's running, and there's like a pickup. There's a big rig truck that comes in, a cattle truck, and she ends up getting some safety at that point away from Leatherface and the hitchhiker. The hitchhiker gets smacked, fucking run over by the cattle truck, and Leatherface is still chasing after Sally. He goes after the trucker who helped her out. The trucker hits him with a wrench. Leatherface falls down, saws his knee, but he still gets up because he will not stop. And he's just he keeps limping after her. And then there's another pickup truck that she's waving. It's like, ah! But then the pickup truck stops, and then she gets in it. She's covered in blood, and the truck drives away, and you get the image of her uh, just laughing maniacally because she's cracked. She's completely lost it, and she's become completely hysterical, and for good reason, because she's she can't even believe herself that she's escaped. And so she's laughing at the face of death while Leatherface is swinging the chainsaw around while the sun sets, and she's laughing in the face of death, literally. It's just like, and the was like, "Ah!" And then the movie ends. That's just a Chainsaw Massacre for you. Yeah, it is an excellent movie. It's a fantastic film. It's still a fucking classic. Great performances by by everyone involved in the cast. The direction by Tobe Hooper is phenomenal. I would probably say it might be still to this day his best film in terms of direction. I love the way he shot some of the sequences of Marilyn Burns near the end when she was in the house being tied to the chair, and it zooms in on her eyeball, and then you see these different angles. One where the eye is upside down, and then you see another one where it zooms in on just the red, the red veins in her eyes. There's a lot of really artistic touches that Tobe Hooper brought to this film that really elevated this low budget movie into making it really look and feel like an art house movie at points. Now, it wasn't really pretentious in that way, but it was still had a very great feel and look to it. Um, it's a scuzzy movie, but it's still at times is a beautiful looking film. It's a gorgeous looking movie at points for a film with such scuzzy source material. Uh, it introduced the character of Leatherface, which is an iconic, which is one of the first horror icons. After Norman Bates, you have Leatherface, and then after Leatherface, you had Michael Myers, and then you had Jason Voorhees, and Freddy Krueger, and so forth and so on. Leatherface was one of the first really big horror icons. Uh, Before that, you had stuff like the Universal Monsters, but Leatherface is one of those that really broke into the mainstream. But Leatherface also was one of the first really 100% original horror icon creations for especially the slasher film market. I mean, Norman Bates it was based on a book. Psycho was based on a book by Robert Bloch. It wasn't a completely original creation. Leatherface was, for the most part, a pretty, almost a completely original creation. There really wasn't a character named Leatherface before Leatherface in books or in anything else until the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Now, the character was definitely inspired by Ed Gein, but it wasn't Ed Gein. It was its own different animal, and So yeah, in a lot of ways, Leatherface, I would probably say, is the first slasher icon. Uh, Definitely the first slasher film icon. And Gunnar, I said it before, I'll say it again. He was fantastic. Very underrated performance. Did a great job with what little role. He wasn't even on the screen that much. And Leatherface is is one of the most memorable characters and one of the most memorable things about the movie. And he really didn't even have that much screen time, and that's a testament to Gunnar Hansen and to his ability to perform uh, under pretty much really restrictive circumstances with such a low budget and really not that much to work with for his character in terms of character and motivation or character development or even lines to say. So that's a big testament to Gunnar, and he will be forever remembered for that. And he will always be Leatherface to me. Anyone else that tried to pick up the saw and, put on the face just never really came close, in my opinion, to what Gunnar brought to the character. Uh, and Marilyn Burns, one of the best horror heroines I could think of in the slasher film. She went through hell and she survived and she lived to tell the tale. Um, and through, like I said, through the film, her spirit will live on. And she did a great job. And in a lot of ways, her performance is underrated too, because we don't really hear a lot about that when we talk about horror heroines. A lot of people, we might talk about we talk about Jamie Lee Curtis from Halloween and things like that, but what about Marilyn Burns? Because I think she did just as good job as Jamie Lee Curtis did in Halloween, and she broke a lot of new ground for horror heroines in the franchise. She paved the way for example, for Jamie Lee Curtis. Because I don't really buy that Marion Crane in Psycho was the first one horror heroine, because she was not really a likable character, and she didn't live. She died. She wasn't a final girl. So Sally, in a lot of ways, is one of the first final girls. Even before Alien or Halloween, you had Sally. So that aspect of she's great. She's fantastic. Everyone else in the supporting cast is great. Jim Siedow and Edwin Neal. The music by Tobe Hooper and was another guy who did the music as well. Tobe Hooper and Wayne Bell. Cinematography by Daniel Pearl was really great, and editing by Larry Carroll and Sally Richardson was equally great. Screenplay by Kim Henkel and Tobe Hooper was actually pretty solid. It's a very simple plot. It didn't need to be super complex. I know some people like to say it doesn't have any plot. I disagree with that. I think it has plenty of plot. It's just a very straightforward plot. It's a straightforward plot of these people who come in, pick up a hitchhiker, things go wrong, drop them off. They end up in an area of a small town in the South that they definitely don't want to be in, and they run into the wrong type of people who want to eat them for dinner and slaughter them. They run into a slaughterhouse that's not for cattle. It's for humans. They run into a human slaughterhouse, and they become the next victims. That's it's as simple as you can get. And the film works really well in a lot of ways because of that. It's really well paced. It's 84 minutes. That's with the end credits. Without the end credits, about 81. It's a very fast-paced movie. Like I said, it has a little bit of a slow burn, but once it gets started, it does not stop until the end credits start rolling. And it's every bit as unrelenting and as powerful as the Saw that is one of the big stars of the film, the chainsaw. It doesn't run out of gas. I really don't think this is one of those films that runs out of gas. It starts off slow like a chainsaw. It takes a few pulls to get it going, but once it gets going, it'll last for a while. If you got a good, well-built saw, and that's what this movie is. It's a good, well-built horror film, and so it does. It lasts. It lasts a long time, and it cuts to the bone. I really don't know what to say. I really do not want to, but I really don't know what else to say. See, I'm speechless. This movie is so excellent. I'm speechless. I don't even know what else I can possibly say about this movie, other than if I was gonna rate it out of 5 stars, I'm gonna give 5 out of 5. I don't find anything wrong with this movie. I really don't. I think this is definitely one of the premier horror films out there. It's an excellent movie. It's a classic. It'll stand the test of time. It stood the test of time now for a reason, because because it's a great movie. In a lot of ways, that's why it stood the test of time so much, because it is such a great film. And yeah, so and once again, I can't say this enough. Rest in peace, Gunnar. Rest in peace, Marilyn. Rest in peace, Jim Siedow, and rest in peace, Paul A. Partain, and anyone else who was in the cast and crew who were responsible and who were a part of making this wonderful classic film. I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, may you rest in peace, and thanks. Thank you. Thank you for being a part of, and thank you for helping create such a masterpiece of horror cinema. Thank you for watching my review, and I will see you guys later. See ya.